Hi guys. Awesome. I have a bunch of really good questions, so I'm just gonna dive in. A couple of these are from Cage Tiger before she had to take off. One, although I've seen this from a couple of different people, basic same question. What do you think is the purpose / effect of requiring a form of currency or a resource to save, an ability that's freely given in most games? Is it an ability that's freely given in most games? I mean, I feel like there's a modern tendency towards like a strict checkpointing system in a lot of cinematic games. And I'm using cinematic really loosely, I guess, but in a lot of like linearly progression-based games, which you could argue Ori is, there's a tendency to checkpoint every time you make progress, like on a linear quest. That's harder to do in a game that's about exploring the environment, right? Like, I'm thinking about games like, you know, The Last of Us or Uncharted or things in that vein. Games in the like modern adventure game genre, like you know, The Walking Dead or whatever. Games like Arkham Knight, which I've been playing recently. All of these games have checkpoint systems that are based on the idea that you're constantly sort of progressing one or more linear quests, and pretty much any action that you take is either useless effort, isn't worth anything, or progresses one of those quests, progresses you in some way, in which case it'll checkpoint after that. A 2D platformer that's about exploration, where you can sort of retread the same ground over and over again and find different ways of going through it, can't really do saving in that way. So there are old school traditional checkpoint systems where every time you pass a physical marker, it will save the game, and Ori has that, right? Like there are checkpoints that when I go past them, it refills my energy and it saves the game. The fact that they can make those quite rare, right? The built-in checkpoints don't occur very often. They only occur really at like key story appropriate moments, at the climax of individual arcs of the narrative. But I can still save, but I can't save whenever I want. And I actually think, like, as a player, I kind of hate it because it's hard, but I think ultimately really like the way that my energy, right, like my blue resource, is shared between at least a couple of different things. I actually really like how it's set up right now, that I can use that resource to save my game whenever I want, or I can use it to unlock areas that that otherwise I wouldn't be able to unlock, or, you know, get at things that I couldn't get at, which is sometimes necessary, or I can use it to fight better. I can use it as an offensive ability, and I need to personally balance my ability to explore the world, which is strictly necessary, right? Like, if I find myself going up against a blue barrier and I don't have any energy, then I am gonna have to like come back some other time. Hi, Shiro. I'm gonna have to like come back some other time when I have energy, or I'm gonna like miss out on a significant thing. Like exploring that geography is a huge part of the game. Fine. But it also comes in like really super handy sometimes when I have to fight like a tough enemy in a difficult area. Like, I really want to use energy for that, but I have to balance that with you know, I really desperately don't want to not have energy when I need to get through a barrier, and I want to be able to save my game whenever I want, which means I need to have energy all the time. I actually really kind of like this system. I think that it's a neat balance between allowing me to save my game whenever I want, which, like, the problem with that is that it in a platformer especially, it removes the sense that, like, there's of stakes. It removes the sense that, like, when I go through an area, I'm taking a risk, and what am I risking exactly? Because it doesn't hurt me when Ori dies, and in this game especially, like, there are games where the reboot of Tomb Raider is a game where it hurt me every time Lara died, because it was physically painful to watch. This game doesn't do that. Like, when Ori dies, that's fine. I'm fine with it. What I lose is the time and the sort of concentration that I expended since the last time that I saved. Stuff that I'm going to have to do again. And so if I can save all of the time, then that becomes very low risk, right? What I lose becomes very, very, it becomes almost insignificant. If I can't save often at all, if I, like, if the game is stingy about my ability to save, then it becomes extremely high risk. And I can tell you, there are some players for whom that is extremely appealing. It is not for me. That the prospect of dying and having to go way back and repeat a large chunk of the game sounds awful to me. So, like, that's not part of how I have fun. Sorry, I'm just trying to, my cat is a little bit in my way here. So I feel like this provides a nice balance in a way that's not, that's subjective to some extent. It's based on an economy rather than the designer's choices of where to put checkpoints, right? Often the way that you would control this is you would say, like, as a designer, based on how I want the game to feel, I'm going to put checkpoints here, here, here. I'm going to put them this frequently, and that's going to regulate the amount of risk that the player takes at any given moment. In this game, I get to kind of regulate the amount of risk I want to take at any given moment, because I get to choose where I put those checkpoints, but at the same time, I have to give something up every time I do. I have to pay at least a nominal fee, and so I can't just put them down everywhere. And especially the fact that, like, there are barriers that I need energy to get through makes me feel like spending the last of my energy on a save point is a really bad idea, because I don't ever want to be without energy. Hey, you gotta not be in my way. Okay, that's how this works. So I'm actually really kind of a fan of the way that it does that. Here's an interesting question. Naru is introduced as female, and yet I consistently misgendered her, and apparently Day 9 did the same thing. So Cage Tiger is saying they're clearly trying to evoke a maternal angle with Naru, which I see. Like, when you bring it up, when you frame it like that, I do get that. So why do I think that this misgendering has happened, you know, more than once? Does it have to do with the fact that she's less obviously female shaped than characters in games usually are? And that may have something to do with it, although honestly, I had a hard time reading gender into her at all, and I don't remember when she was actually gendered. So I'm taking your word on it that that she was identified as female, because I missed that when that happened. And it may have been at a point in the narration where the narrator was throwing around pronouns to refer to things that I wasn't sure what the narrator was talking about. Or I may have just like I skimmed over it or something, or it just didn't register. I would not say that I like strongly identified Naru as male. I identified Naru as non-human. And so the masculine pronoun was sort of my natural go-to. But I got more of a gender neutral read off of her. And in my mind that has to do with the fact that she was non-human rather than the fact that like she looked masculine or she didn't look traditionally female. But having said that, I'm sure that influenced me on a subconscious level. I think it is interesting that she is, you know, she's got a body shape that you don't often see in video games on any character, and especially not on female characters. So I think that's a really interesting choice. It's hard for me to, I guess, really dissect how the misgendering happened, or why that tends to happen, except that I don't think she's very clearly gendered by the game. I think that the game sort of makes her feel very neutral in my mind. So I guess that's what I would say. So here's, I've watched 6 or 7 playthroughs of Ori on Twitch or YouTube, and I'm the first person to have realized that you get a free save every time you run across an energy cell when you have max energy. Other players, other streamers collect the energy without thinking about capacity and waste it very often. Does that surprise me? And what are my thoughts on it as a player and as a game developer? It does kind of surprise me, because that's a mechanic that I feel like is extremely old school. That's a mechanic from, like, you know, Nintendo platformers, and all sorts of other games. Like, as a gamer, as somebody who's played a lot of games and feels like I have a decent gaming literacy, that's just a trope, right? That's just something I've seen a million times. So it kind of does surprise me that other people aren't familiar with it. I mean, it's not something that's often explained, I guess. It's not something that's frequently made explicit, but I do feel like it's something that you see all the time in games. And if you've played games, and I guess if you think about the economy in games, I mean, maybe it has to do with I mean, honestly, maybe it has something to do with my board game literacy and the fact that I play a lot of tabletop games where that kind of economy is much more explicit, and it's really necessary for you to be familiar with it and understand the way that it works in detail. And in video games, I mean, there's a sense of reward every time I collect those blue crystals, whether or not I'm actually gaining energy from them or not, because, you know, it plays the same pickup sound effect. I get these like cool particle effects. I get to see it like jump across the screen at me. I feel like I'm getting something, even if I'm in a position where it it doesn't actually, like I'm already maxed out and it's not going to give me anything. So I can see, like, as a somebody who plays a lot of video games, and maybe somebody who's used to a different paradigm, a paradigm of, like, you know, coins in Mario, or resources that that don't have those kinds of limits. I don't know. It's just, to me, it's a trope. To me, it's something that's extremely familiar. And so I'm a little surprised that other people are less familiar with it. But at the same time, we all have different experiences. And so, of course, people are going to be familiar and have different perspectives on different things. It's a trope that I think is cool. I like it. I have always liked it, because it, I mean, it does a couple of things. For one, it means that if you're paying attention, then you can optimize your performance in a way that isn't dexterity based, that's more strategic, which I always like. And then it means that, like, I get to save, and I get to feel like I'm saving for free more often, because every time I recognize that situation, I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna just save here because I get more stuff. What do you think about the map and the world? Most 2D platformers are either divided into levels too small to need a map, or have a very different style. Do you feel like you're in an open forest, or are you on tracks? Interesting. This feels like two different questions. I'm not sure if this is one question or not. I guess I'm going to just start talking and we'll see. So I like the map. I mean, the world is gorgeous. I like the world. The world is really nice. It's got a good balance of, like, it's designed really well so that at the beginning, it was extremely linear and it felt like I only had one place to go. And then at a certain point, like when I got to the tree of life, or the spirit tree, or whatever it's called, it felt like it opened up in a significant way. But in fact, there were still not a lot of ways that I could go. Like, it felt like there were more ways that I could go, and there were more ways maybe that I could go, but there was still sort of like, it was pushing me in a very specific direction, and there wasn't an enormous amount of variation in the path that I could take to get there. There were mostly like side paths that I could take. So my expectation is that it's going to continue to open up gradually, and you know, before long, like I'm going to this tree, and then I'm gonna have to go to the ruins, and the ruins are like on the opposite side of the map from the tree, so I'm gonna end up traversing a lot of the area that I've already traversed, but I'm expecting that there will be new other pathways that I could take instead, and so there's gonna be a little bit more non-linearity that gets introduced as I go forward, but it's still gonna be a lot of like, because there's this Metroidvania thing of they're giving me more abilities that open up new areas, which means those are the new areas that I'm going to go to at that point in time. So they're actually maintaining a pretty tight control over what areas I'm in at what point in the progression of the larger narrative. All of that feels really smooth to me. It feels really good. In terms of the map specifically, I like the map. It makes the world feel large, because it is divided up into areas that are... Cat, come on. That are, you know, that are, you know, chunks that aren't like huge, but all of the areas are connected. And not just in one way, but they're connected in multiple ways. So it makes it feel like each of those areas is really part of a much larger world, and that like I'm seeing the whole world, or I'm traversing the entire world. The map is also has already proven useful to me several times, because I use it to like less to check my orientation, although I have done that a couple of times and that's been nice to make sure like this is the direction I should be going. More to see how different areas connect to one another, and if there are places that I haven't explored yet. And those, like, actually the Fog of War map is maybe the most useful thing. And I appreciate that this game has it, because as beautiful as the world is, and it doesn't ever feel boring, or at least so far it hasn't felt boring to me, there aren't a ton of landmarks, which makes it hard to navigate. It makes it hard to sort of like spatialize yourself, to understand the local space that you're in. So I mean, I got lost at one point. Like, I had to get back to a spirit door, and I had no idea where the spirit door was, and it didn't appear on the map, so I just wandered around for a little while, and the space that I was in was small enough that that was fine. Like, I could wander around for a little while and find it. But that's not good enough for a larger game, right? Like, especially if the world opens up at some point, or if I have to traverse like a large area, or I'm looking for secrets. Like, I, as a player, need to be able to keep track of exactly where I am and where things are in relation to one another. And the art style, the world design of this game is great for a lot of things, but it doesn't lend itself to that. It doesn't, and that's really a landmark issue. And I think that, you know, the game would change significantly if they put a lot more landmarks into it. I don't know that that would be a good thing, but it makes it harder to navigate. And so the solution, rather than putting landmarks into the game, is to give me a map that makes it really easy for me to reference like where things are in relation to one another, and help me understand, to help me visualize what the layout of the level is. I think I answered that question. What do you think about player-defined checkpoint system compared to the norm of having more static save checkpoints? I personally don't like the save system because of the insignificance of death that it causes. Yeah, I mean, so I feel like I addressed this. I think that this is just a player preference thing, right? Golvin1337, who asked this question, and I just have sort of subjectively different preferences or enjoyment of games, and that's fine. I totally get that. I personally really appreciate this save system, and it's because I feel like it gives me a good balance. It gives me the kind of balance that I personally want between feeling like I'm taking risks, feeling like I'm pressing my luck, feeling that there are consequences to my actions, and also not driving me totally fucking insane every time that I die and I have to do stuff over again. But that's me. Also, how are you finding the skill tree system so far? Haven't had too much experience with it, but do I feel like it has enough impact on the game? I'm fine with it so far. I feel like it's pretty simple, which is good. I wouldn't want it to be any more complex than it is. I think it's unfortunate that I can pretty easily unlock abilities that don't do me any good, because they're like improve base abilities that I don't have yet. That's sort of a shame, especially because as a first-time player, I don't even know what that means. Like, when it says it lowers the cooldown on my charge flame, like, what the fuck is a charge flame? I assume that's good, right? Because it's in a skill tree. Like, I can measure what the value the designer believes that skill has, based on where it is in the skill tree. But I don't actually know what it means because I don't have that ability. And in fact, if I unlock it, it doesn't do anything until I get that ability. And that feels like a little bit of a misstep. It feels a little bit of like a rough edge. That this game does not have a lot of rough edges. This game is smooth like all the way around, and so that's a little surprising. But it hasn't been like a major impediment to me so far, and I feel like the more I play, the more familiar I get with the base mechanics, the more they introduce these like really basic mechanics, the less I'm going to have that problem with the skill tree. Again, I am definitely playing a route where I'm going broad and not deep, and I think that, I don't know if that's a pattern for me. Probably is. I'm sure, I don't know that the game, I don't know how the game would play differently if I went deep rather than the broad, if I picked one of those 3 chains and just like went down it. I don't know. I guess part of it is I'm not that kind of a player who thinks so hard about that level of optimization. If I were gonna play this game, you know, a dozen times, then I'm sure that I would do some runs where I said like, I'm just gonna pick this chain and see what it's like to just do that stuff, and get all the way to the end of it, because I bet there's cool stuff at the end of all of those chains. But I'm at the level of play, I guess, that I have, like all of that basic stuff seems really useful, and like having my attacks do more damage, like I want that because I kind of suck at the attacks, like, and I know it's just gonna get harder. So if the game can give me an advantage there, I will take it. And I kind of feel that way about all of the low level stuff in all 3 of those tracks. So but I don't mind there being a skill tree. I play RPGs. I like skill trees. Unconsumable resource for save states. As the player gains more slots, using them for save seems less significant, so I feel like the game uses it as an intro mechanic before the rest of them are introduced. Hard for me to comment at this point with 3 slots and frequent either necessity or temptation to use them for other things. I still feel like there's an economy at play, that I can't just save whenever I want. Now, possibly as I get more and more slots, that'll change. But my guess is that they're also going to introduce more and more things that I will want to use energy for. And so there will continue to be a tension. That's my guess. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Do you feel like this game is being carried by its aesthetics and polish? Is the gameplay itself interesting to you? Yeah, I like the gameplay. The gameplay is totally fine. I mean, for a platformer, platformers aren't like my jam, especially, but it feels like a really solid platformer. I like the attack mechanics. I like the enemy designs. I feel like all of those mechanics are well implemented, and it's fun to play. The story doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like the opening 15 minutes with Naru and, babe, those are my cables. Just chill. When Naru dies and you're introduced to Ori and all of that stuff, like that was emotionally affecting. And like I want to save the forest. And like there's this big scary owl, and I hate owls because I played Shelter. Like there's narrative elements that are compelling, but they're compelling on like an archetypal level. Like, you know, Tree of Life is good, let's help it. Big scary demon owl is bad, let's run away from it. Let's like stop it from arbitrarily destroying all of the light in the forest. But I don't feel like it's a well-written story that is like, that has a deeper meaning. It feels extremely shallow, which is fine. That's fine. And I mean, it doesn't need it. Like the the aesthetics, the beauty of the game on a visual level and on a mechanical level, the controls, the mechanics of combat, all of that is solid, and I will play the game for that. I appreciate that there's a narrative context. I appreciate that there's a good guy and a bad guy and a thing that I'm trying to do. But like, that's not gonna win a Hugo Award, which is the only kind of literary award that I can think of. A Pulitzer? It's not gonna win a Pulitzer. It's not gonna win like any kind of literary award. And that's fine. Not every game is going to, and not every game needs to. And this game is solid on enough fronts that that it doesn't need that. It just needs enough to hang together, and that's what it's got. Okay, short story. Yeah, so I'm sorry Cage Tiger's not here. This is, so I forget exactly how this came up, but somehow in chat on Monday when we were playing Mostly Walking, Truly Madly Viking came up in chat, because of course it did. Truly Madly Viking is a romance novel about a Viking who, if I remember correctly, is transported forward in time to the modern era, and in order to, like, you know, sexually satisfy the protagonist of the novel, who I don't remember exactly who she is, but she's somebody who is obviously not sexually satisfied and needs a like 11th century Viking to come forward in time. Oh, there's a magical whale who like sends him forward in time, and she's like a fertility whale or something. I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird book. It's a romance novel. It's like, it's a proto supernatural romance. Like it's pre-Twilight. Here's the story with the book. Again, I don't know where this came up in chat, but I was like, oh, Truly Madly Viking. I'm extremely familiar with that. I have a story about that. And so now everybody wants to know. When I enrolled in undergraduate college, I went to Pomona College in Southern California. And the summer before, so I guess there's sort of two things. The summer before my freshman year, like after I graduated from high school, we got an orientation packet. And one of the things that the orientation packet said was all freshmen are required to take a, I forget if they called it a seminar course. It was a writing intensive course that was for freshmen. And it was like general topics. There were several that you could choose from. I ended up taking a course in Spanish literature. So this was like a class in English in which we read the English translations of Spanish literature, but then talked about them as literature and their historical context and all of that stuff. And there was a lot of writing. And that was sort of the point of the class. It was a writing intensive freshman class. So that was one of the things. The other thing was that we had required reading for the summer. Before we came in, we had to read a book called Mendel's Dwarf, which is an interesting novel about a geneticist who talked a lot about genetics and science and the history of science and all kinds of stuff like that, and also like social theory stuff. Anyway, it was an interesting book. It was a required reading for the first day of class at my undergraduate. The senior prank for the class that was the senior class that year, the year before I enrolled, involved breaking into the Office of Student Affairs, stealing stationery, and getting access to the mailing list for all incoming freshmen, and then sending out letters to all incoming freshmen on official college stationery that said, hey, we're doing this thing where if you read a second book, if you do additional required summer reading, or optional, I guess, summer reading, and write an essay like write a long paper comparing the two novels or something like that, I don't know, then you can opt out of the freshman writing intensive seminar class. So of course the book, the optional summer reading was Truly Madly Viking. And a lot of people who were not familiar with that particular novel and were excited about the prospect of not having to take this like required freshman class went out and bought and read Truly Madly Viking with the intention of writing a comparative essay between it and Mendel's Dwarf. And I don't think anybody actually wrote the paper, and the college was very quick to send out like correction letters that said, you know, this was a prank, do not pay any attention, everybody has to take their required class, you can't get out of it, there's no need to go and read Truly Madly Viking. But of course that became sort of a class joke, and in his orientation speech the president of the college joked about it because it was something that, you know, we had all heard about, and we had all become kind of somewhat familiar with this really sort of goofy romance novel premise. So when I went to my 10-year reunion, the t-shirt isn't really a story, but when I went to my 10-year reunion this year, our class shirt was this Truly Madly Reunion reference to that prank our freshman year. So that's the story. That's my Truly Madly Viking story. That is how I am familiar with that book. Again, I'm not sure exactly why anyone else in the chat is familiar with that book. As far as I know, it's not an especially popular romance novel, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I just don't know that like sector of the industry. But it is, yeah, that's my story. That's my story. Okay, and that's Play by Play. So I am super glad to be back. I am planning to continue to do this Thursday nights at 9 o'clock. Hopefully that schedule will work out for the near future. For you know, the rest of the year, I guess, excepting holidays. We'll see. We'll play it by ear. Follow me on Twitter and you will get more up-to-date information week by week about when I will be actually streaming. And then I will try to be better about getting this stuff up on YouTube, and maybe Eve White will help me with that. We'll see. Regardless, thank you so much for being here, for hanging out, for being part of the chat, being part of the community, for listening to me talk about video games. This has been a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see you guys next week. All right, have a great night. Bye.